Guys, welcome to Agile for Admins, Supercharging Your Delivery Experience. My name is Kyle Husney. I'm the Salesforce Innovation Lead. I am the opening act for the opening act and the opening act of the opening act of tonight. So I'm no Janet Jackson, no Metallica, but I'm a little bit more fun, I think. So before we jump into the really exciting stuff, you guys, who's their first Dreamforce? If you guys have not played yet, I like to play Dreamforce Bingo. So here's your free space if you haven't already got it this week. Forward-looking statement. So make all of your buying decisions based on currently available products and services. Don't worry, there's nothing I'm going to show that's too crazy. But before we get started, just want to give you guys a little intro about me and myself. So like I said, my name is Kyle Husney. I'm the Salesforce Innovation Lead at WL Gore. Has anyone ever heard of a Gore-Tex jacket before? Or Gore-Tex boots? Yes, we're the people behind that. But guess what? We also make medical products, and we also have a performance solution division as well. So we make more than jackets. But I've had a pretty fun journey as a Salesforce admin. I'm actually a self-taught Salesforce admin. I was basically thrown my junior year in college and basically said, hey, go build some Salesforce dashboards for us. And I went, well, what's the website? Where do I go for all this? So I've had a pretty fun journey. I've moved up to become a business analyst, a project manager, now more recently, more so the product manager of our Salesforce instance. Worked across financial services, high tech, now in the manufacturing field. But when I'm not playing with all this fun Salesforce stuff, yes, I am actually interning at my local CrossFit gym. So if there's any CrossFit folks out there, there are two of my big jams outside of that. So let's jump into the real fun. So what are we going to walk away with today, guys? First, we're going to understand the problems that Salesforce admins face when delivering new features and functionality. As you guys can imagine, after this week, my boss is actually here with me. Guess what she's asking? When can we get all that really cool stuff? So we're going to understand that a little bit more and what we're facing there. The second piece, how can Agile actually help us face those challenges as admins and further our delivery experience? And last but not least, right, we've addressed the problem. We know how Agile is going to solve it. Now what we're going to give you guys is a couple tips. I've done this a few different places. We're going to give you a few tips of how you can take that information and implement those Agile ideas at your own companies. So let's jump in here. So just a really quick poll. Who has never had any formal experience with Agile before? Give me a quick raise of the hand. That's awesome. This will be a really good set for you guys. Who's heard of Agile a little bit, kind of knows a little bit of the ideas, maybe created a few stories? And where are my Agile experts at? Go ahead, raise your hands. Awesome. Glad to see you guys here as well. All right. So we're going to jump in here, and we're going to kind of put ourselves on a quick journey of what it's like to be a Salesforce admin. So think about it. It's 7:45. You've got your coffee in your hand. You've got Journey on in your ear. You're ready to take anything that's coming at you, right? And you got to pop those headphones out, because you start to see some of your users coming at you. And they're coming with you saying, hey, our customers and our partners, we really need to be interacting with them. We need to talk to them every day. I need to know what's going on. Okay, I just got to get to my desk and maybe I can solve that problem. Oh, and there comes another one out of the woodworks. Hey, all these new Salesforce features are out there. What are we going to be doing to help use those going forward for our user base? How can we really start to innovate with Salesforce and all their new functionality? Okay, 2 down, I can make it to my desk, I'm almost there. And then there comes another one. Hey, it's me, your favorite sales manager. I need to know what my team is doing. How can I keep tabs on their activity and make sure they're driving sales the most productive way possible? All right, we're 3 for 3, I'm almost at my desk. But last second, there comes a marketing folk. You know they always pop out of the woodwork, they're everywhere. And they say we need to have that marketing data available for our teams. We need that available for the sales reps so they know what we're actually talking to our customer about. So there I am. I'm finally sprinting to my desk. I've almost made it. And you guys are probably wondering, so everyone wants our help. What's the problem with that, right? Isn't it great to be wanted? I'm now at my desk. I've got all these wonderful requests. There's a few things I think that have popped up for me, and you guys may have experienced them as well. The first is I've got all these wonderful requests, but I'm not really sure which one to do first. So, what's all the work I have to do? Maybe it was tough for me to remember what exactly that sales manager asked me for. When should I be doing that work? How do I actually decide when we're going to do it? There's uncertainty around when I'm actually going to deliver it. So maybe I have prioritized it, and now I'm trying to figure out, all right, when is that going to be available for folks? But not just when can I deliver it, but when I deliver it, will it be the quality standards that we hold ourselves to as Salesforce admins? There's nothing worse than rolling something out and then having someone go, oh, you completely missed because we tried to rush it, right? We want to make sure every time we're giving that quality product that we trust as Salesforce admins. And last but not least, is constant collaborations with our users. When we look at that product that we call Salesforce, we see as we drive the roadmap for Salesforce, it's driven through our voice. So for all of us as admins, we're looking to drive that same voice for our internal customers as our users. So this is great. So how should I start to take all these problems and start to solve this? So here's what I did. I used this wonderful little thing, which I didn't know at the time actually existed when it was called Waterfall, but it looked and felt a lot like this. I start to take really, really in-depth requirements. I'd meet with a ton of people. I'd go, okay, let me get back to you. I have all the requirements now. Let me go design something. Okay, I'd design it. I'd mock it up. We'd go, okay, great. The design looks good. We'd develop it. We'd test it. And then we realized along the way there was a few things that were kind of happening. So we'd get to these kind of big blocks that happened, right? So our requirements, they would start changing. Why? Because we'd be maybe 6 months down the road doing development, and the business was now fundamentally at a different position. And that test, we'd start to test it and have our users looking at the actual functionality, only to realize that, hey, maybe we put too many button clicks there. Maybe we thought something should have been automated, or maybe we just completely missed a process that was essential to having this work done. And then once we got to the maintenance part of this, we were almost a year and a half down the line in some cases before we were actually starting to be able to see value from this work. And then there were some worst case scenarios that did pop up as well. So in those cases we talked about, maybe the work was a little bit later than we expected. Why? Because we really didn't have a way to predict, all right, we know this type of work only takes us about a week, or this work will take us about 3 months, and be able to tell those folks that. So we would kind of work with that, but then we'd get those urgent requests too. I'd have a sales manager run over to me and say, hey, I definitely need this information ASAP. That's a process we do. I need that done. I like to call that, and you guys have all probably seen this, it's called drop anything development. Okay, drop whatever you're doing and get this done for me. I really, really, really need it. Okay, I got it. I put my headphones on, I got my jams on, I'm good. And then it turns out that only that one sales manager actually does that, and the 3 others just kind of look at him like he's crazy. So yeah, so it was kind of tough for us, and that was one of those things that we weren't quite sure of how we could handle that, right? How could we actually make sure that we were delivering the work in the right way? And then last but not least, right, we maybe had some bad feedback. Maybe we saw a few features weren't quite as receptive. Our users really started to have trouble feeling invested. Were we truly building a platform that was for them, or were we building a platform that was kind of based just around whatever requirements that we could grab? So where did I find that sweet spot? I think this was kind of, for me, the epiphany of all my Salesforce world was Agile. Agile kind of came into my life probably about 2 years into my journey as a Salesforce admin, and it fundamentally changed how I worked with my users. Now, the big thing, it is not a development style. It's not a process. To do Agile and truly do it right, you have to think of this as a mindset shift. It is a set of values and a philosophy that is going to absolutely change the way that you do work. Now, what you guys are seeing here, and I see you guys taking pictures of this, the Agile Manifesto is a wonderful thing to base yourself on and really, really hold those values true. Now, the catch with this, if you read the little part at the bottom, it's not that we don't value this stuff over here on the right. So you can see process, documentation, some of the stuff that looked and felt a little bit more like a waterfall type plan. It's not that we don't say that stuff's valuable. It's just we value that stuff a little bit more on the left-hand side. It's kind of using all the advantages that Salesforce has given us with some of these point-and-click declarative tools and really using that to our advantage to quickly show value to our user base. So we're going to start to now work through those 3 problems and really start to address how Agile is actually going to help you solve those issues. So that first one, prioritizing the work. So typically, when I would go and I'd grab some user stories or requirements from our folks, where did I actually end up putting them? Some of you may do this as well now, is they kind of started in a notebook. Maybe they were in my Evernote notebook, and that was where they lived. And that was the only place that I had to keep track of that. So what kind of got hairy with that is that was my Evernote notebook, or that was my piece of paper. So Agile, the wonderful thing that we do in here is we use this wonderful thing called a product. In our world, our product is obviously Salesforce. As some of you who have multiple clouds, you may have a sales cloud, a service cloud, commerce cloud. That product is then made up of a list of features that we call our backlog. So what's in that backlog, right? We have a bunch of those user stories. Think of those as basically all the times that folks come to you and say, hey, I want to automate that process. I need these new set of fields. I need this custom development done to make a new application on the Salesforce platform. Sometimes you'll see those actually in multiple user stories. There's no limit to how this is all captured. But once those stories are captured, right, we've now talked to our user base, our stakeholders, our development team, we have this work captured. What's the real benefit? What we're doing is we're going through and estimating and saying, how long is that story going to take us to develop? Typically, you'll see folks use a story point method, which usually works off, which you guys have ever heard, Fibonacci sequence. So if you ever see stories where it's like 1, 3, 5, and you're like, well, why is that 3? It's typically just a little best practice. But sometimes folks will also do that in just sheer hours. So if it takes you 5 hours, you write 5 hours. But what we walk away with is we have a prioritized list of user stories, and now we actually have an estimate of how long these stories will take us to deliver. And again, you can't beat that. Why? Because now you have a roadmap to work on. So when folks go to ask you, what's next on our roadmap? What should we be working on as a Salesforce team? You now have a clear indication of what that work looks like and how long it's going to take you to deliver. Now, the big piece of this is who prioritizes that work. So how many solo admins do I have today hopping in here? Awesome, solo admins. You guys rock. I was a solo admin, so I know how much fun it is. So traditionally, in big Agile teams, what you guys will see, you have typically a product owner, a development team, and business stakeholders. Now, admins, where do we sit in this mix? Depending. If you're a solo admin, you get to kind of play two hats, right? You're kind of hanging out on the development team, and you're hanging out as the product owner. If you're maybe a little bit bigger of an organization, maybe you're still also a product owner, but in some cases, you may be on the development team. So you're really working across those three big buckets and saying, hey, as a development team, what's important to us? Hey, as a business team, what is important to us? And that product owner is kind of bringing those two together to say, how do we manage our technical and business alignment to make sure that we're delivering the best results for us? Now, a few we'll say kind of tips. These are a few things I've used in the past to help actually prioritize these user stories. I'll start with the one on the right. This is what I would say is kind of the more entry level because it's a little bit more basic. It's traditionally referred to as Moscow analysis. So you'll see on there's kind of these 4 big buckets. You have must, should, could, and won't. So pretty easy for you guys to see where that relatively falls in. It's really, hey, I really need to work on this versus something that's kind of a nice ask. So if there's a rainy day and I have a little bit of time, I know where I can pick some work up at. Really easy to take those big buckets and work with this. Now, as you start to get, I think, a little bit more advanced, you will see there's another method where you can actually customize this and really use what drives your business forward to help prioritize those stories. So what you can do, just a few examples I put up here, is actually start to pick those buckets and give kind of a range. You can pick high, medium, low, 1 to 5, whatever's up to you here. But really what you're doing is you're picking these levers saying, hey, these are the things that drive us forward. Based on that rating is going to base how high that story's priority is. So for example, if we say, hey, customer experience, right now that's our #1 corporate initiative, I can make that worth 75% of our prioritization score. Maybe it's our third most. I can make it worth 25, up to you. So you guys can see that's a little bit more advanced. It does have a little bit more control. It is still subjective to a degree, but it should help you baseline all of your user stories and all the work you're trying to do in a really, really consistent method. Now, we have that work prioritized. And guess what? Now's the fun part. Now's, I think, where all of us like to work and play as admins, right? We're actually going in and starting to do some of this build. So today's flavors of Agile, you guys are going to see 2 flavors today. You're going to talk about a little bit about Scrum and a little bit about Kanban. If I were to put all the flavors of Agile underneath this umbrella, I'd probably need smaller font or a bigger slide. I highly recommend there are trailheads attached to my session, so you can always jump in the event. Those trailheads are on there, are fantastic. You will learn enough today to probably get you started if it's your first day or maybe a first week of hearing about Agile, but those trailheads are essential to get you guys to the next point. So let's jump ahead. So Scrum. Kind of where you'll hear us talk about Scrum is a little bit more focused on these fixed intervals. You guys have probably heard this term sprint before. So traditionally, this looks like a 2-week period where that development team, we're laser focused on what we've committed to that sprint. Why is that great? Because now my development team, instead of having stuff thrown at them left and right from different angles, they know for that 2-week period, they know exactly what they need to execute on, when it needs to be done, and they can really plan their weeks around making sure that work is done. Now to the right, you'll see we have Kanban on there. Kanban is based on an engineering principle that really optimizes our delivery. Now, what that really focuses on, the big piece here, is work in progress. So if you guys have ever seen a Kanban board before, I know we have those available on our list views, what you'll actually see is traditionally a work in progress limit. Now, what that's doing for us is telling our development team, hey, you can only grab these many stories before you can pass go. And why is that powerful? Who's ever tried to multitask, aka maybe trying to send work emails during a Dreamforce session? How easy is that to do? It's not. I spelled something wrong this morning, and everyone noticed too. So again, it really is making sure our developers are laser focused on finding the right work, getting work done with the right quality, and then slowly passing it, slowly passing it alongside to their friends, maybe our QA team, maybe our product owner for some review as well. So we'll give you guys kind of a quick explanation of what this actually looks like and feels like for a release cycle. So for Scrum, what we're doing, you guys hear me talk about getting that backlog ready, right? We have that wonderful list of work that we want to get done. What we're doing basically before we start that actual sprint, our development team, our product owner, we're sitting down and we're looking at all the work we have to do and going, all right, based on these priorities and based on timelines, this is the work we're going to pull in. Traditionally, you'll see us have a number of stories we cap at. That's usually done by story points. So let's say we can take 50 story points in. We're going to try and fill up that sprint with as much work as we can that's as high priority as possible. So once we have that list now, what I've got is this wonderful sprint backlog that I'm saying, hey, development team, go at it. Tackle it with as many things as you possibly can. Let's try and get all 50 points done. Do we always get all 50 points done? Unfortunately, no. Sometimes we get 60 points done, but that's the nature of the beast, right? We have that flexibility to pull work in as quickly as needed. Now, when that's done, I think this is probably the most fun part of the whole adventure, right? Who doesn't love getting to show off what you've just built? I cannot tell you how much fun I have going over to a manager's desk and maybe going, hey, check this out. And they go, whoa, you just built that in 5 minutes? And I'm like, heck yeah, I did. Yeah. And I was like, guess what? There's no code there either, too. And that's when their minds get blown. But I don't always tell them that part. Got to make them think I work a little bit harder than that. But we really get to have a fun celebration between our development team, our business stakeholders, and really show off the work that we're done. Agile, I think, really does, even if you're just a solo admin, it gives you a chance to have a little bit of a celebration with your business stakeholders to really see all the great work that you're developing. Now, from a Kanban side of the house, you guys have probably seen something very similar to this. But what this is actually a screenshot of a free application on the App Exchange from our friends at Salesforce Labs called the Agile Accelerator. Agile Accelerator, just in case you want to write it down. It's a wonderful tool if you guys don't have anything yet. But what you're looking at is basically the different stages that we have that our story or our work will actually go through. So you can see we have work that's in dev, we have work that's in testing, work that's blocked. But those big red lines, that's the most important part, right? That's us putting those hard limits that say, hey, guess what? In each of those lanes, I can only take that much work in. Now, how do we get that work to move? Basically, is someone else. That's the next step, is pulling that work. So when I say, hey, guess what? My development's done. Someone take a look at it. Someone test this out. Someone do this peer review. I'm slowly just pulling it along and just saying, all right, let's grab this work and let's move it to the next stage. Even if you're a solo admin, you can still pull from yourself and move to the next bucket, right? But this is a great way to visualize where your work is at. Now, the catch with this, you will see some teams use what we call a Scrum or a Scrum board. My big recommendation, if you're very new to actual Agile, try and stick with one or the other. It can get a little bit messy when you have two, and sometimes those little, we'll say the rules of engagements occasionally do get blended. But seeing a Scrum board on most Agile teams is pretty typical. But it's one of those things out to start, usually makes it a little bit confusing if you kind of see that mixed for developers. Whoa, uh-oh. So it looks like we got a problem here. So we're working through our development. We just got a ticket. It looks like a new record's not being created from one of our process builders. Can we get that fixed quickly? So kind of what this is, guys, is just a walkthrough of what that would look like if you're actually using this development style. So little differences. So remember, with our Kanban approach, we're really focused on what's in progress and what's in those swim lanes. So what we can do is if we go, hey, this is an urgent ticket, we really need to get that fixed and I need to get a developer on this, all I have to do is go, all right, we can just pull that into our swim lane. Maybe we have to bump something else out, but I can easily pull that in. That's why you will see a lot of service teams that do development work, or we kind of call them our support center. Our support center uses a Kanban approach for all of their tickets. Now, I have also seen some use Scrum, But traditionally, you'll see a lot of development teams do use Scrum. Now, for doing this, depending on how urgent that bug is, maybe it's a very niche situation where we're going, all right, well, it looks like it's only in about 10% cases. It's really not business critical. There's a workaround for it. What we may end up actually doing is taking that backlog defect and saying, let's just put it into next week's sprint. We'll work on it next week when we have a little bit more availability. Why? Because we're trying to keep our developers a little bit more laser focused on exactly what we need to get done in that 2 weeks. Now, is that to say we can't ever take in defects on Scrum? No, there's always exceptions. If there's something that does pop up, what's the catch with this? It's making sure that our business stakeholders and that others who are looking at our metrics know that, hey, maybe if we miss our velocity, maybe we didn't deliver all of our story points, that, hey, just because we had a bug, we really had to make sure that defect was fixed, and that's going to be something that informs us down the road to normalizing that velocity. Now, we've delivered the work. We already prioritized it. Now we're actually going to think about how we talk about work. Now, that is going to go on two very different parties. So first, we have our business stakeholders and our users, but we also have our Agile team. Now, for my solo admins, that may also be just making sure you're having a few minutes to check in with yourself, so don't think you don't apply to that bottom part, all right? So for our business stakeholders and users, what was one of the biggest benefits I saw was that we actually started to take those conversations where folks were checking in with us asking, hey, where's that report at? Or hey, where's that dashboard at? Or hey, where's that new automation I asked for? We started to take those conversations and go, guess what? We have these lovely dashboards and reports in Salesforce. You guys can just take a look at that and let me know if you guys have questions. Maybe shoot me over a chatter post and let me know if you have any ideas or something else you want to see. So we really took this approach of saying we're going to let our business users self-serve themselves in terms of trying to figure out where work is at for them. But that didn't mean that we just didn't talk with them and just say, like, go to the dashboard, look at the dashboard and leave us alone. We still made sure that there was that time that we were talking about that work with them, but it was a very informed conversation. Now they could come with us and say, hey, I saw that work was out in the next release in November. You know, is there any way I can get that bumped into October? We weren't having to have that conversation then where they were trying to figure out where it was in the release. They came to that meeting knowing exactly where it was. Now, on that flip side is making sure you're talking with your development team or just having that check-in with yourself. Now, the big thing on this one is meetings. So Agile does have some typical ceremonies, which you guys will see in a second here, but making sure those meetings goals and agendas are very clear is one of the biggest things I see across a lot of Salesforce teams, even for myself when I'd set across an hour just to go look at things. Really consider meeting times. We as humans, if we give ourselves an hour to do something, how long do you think it will take us to do something? Probably, I saw 3. Yeah, it will take you maybe longer than an hour, but traditionally we'll do everything we can to make that hour fit, right? Instead, it may actually only take us 15 minutes. So really be thoughtful about how you set your meetings up in terms of time, goals, and making sure there's a set agenda for that. Now, the other piece with this is making sure you're talking with your users. One of the big things I found was that I could go down and sit with a user and watch how they actually use my platform, and I got more feedback than I could ever get from a survey that would ever be possible with data. So making sure you're actually sitting back with your users, making sure you're still collecting some of that data from a survey, but really taking those two and marrying them together with your development process is a huge piece to make sure you're delivering the right things. Now, the catch with that, if you're on a bigger team, let's say you're on kind of more of an enterprise setup, that does not mean that developers, like product owners, traditionally are the only ones that go. No, that means everyone, developers and admins, should still be involved. We even have our QA guy go down. Why? Because everyone needs to know the value of our application and really understand those use cases. Now, as I talked about, those traditional ceremonies, these lay a fantastic framework of how to run meetings internally. I have seen this cut down a lot of meetings that happen on kind of the hourly basis. Hey, can you put an hour on my calendar? I want to catch up with you about something. So that first one, sprint planning. We talked about that a little bit already, but really what that session is focusing on is saying, hey, we have this chunk of work. Let's see how much work we can actually get into that time period. What's going to fit? We're really going through and thoughtfully designing who's going to be on that work, when is that work going to be done, and what is the sequence of when the work will be completed in that sprint. Now the second, I think this one is absolutely my favorite. My big recommendation, if you have not started Agile and you're looking for your first step can absolutely be this, a daily stand-up. Now, what this is not is a 15-minute recap of what you did and just chatting about some stuff. Traditionally, you will have to appoint someone as kind of your meeting leader. We'll usually refer to them in Agile as a Scrum Master, but it's really focusing on what you've completed, what you're looking to complete today, and then anything that's blocking you. As you can imagine, traditionally, those 3 buckets take people a lot of time, but they also happen in a lot of different conversations, a lot of emails. That is the #1 way to usually just get the right people to have the right conversation. Maybe instead of all 8 people having it, it's easy to say, hey, here's what I'm being blocked by right now. I'm having some trouble with the IT team. They've got to do some security approvals. All right, great. Let's take that offline and let's talk about that for 5 minutes. Now we've probably saved the whole team from listening to that for an hour. The third one, that sprint demo, actually getting to show the work that we've done. Can't say enough how powerful that is to really connect your development team with your business users and make sure that you really feel the power that you're delivering to your business. And last but not least, the sprint retrospective. So Agile really pushes this concept that to be very successful, it has to have that family feel. It has to have open communication and a lot of trust. So what that means is we're absolutely going to talk about all the awesome things that we did and all the great things that we did well. But we're also going to talk about some of those opportunities for improvement. Notice I didn't say bad things, right? We're really focused on the improvement areas. So hey, maybe we took a little bit longer on testing than we wanted to. Or hey, maybe all the development work all got put into testing at one point. Maybe that wasn't the best, right? But that's okay, right? We're going to talk about that because guess what? We've got another shot at this next week to make sure that we don't pay for that same mistake. So with that, you guys now have a little bit of knowledge about Agile. You know kind of how this may help. So with that great power comes great responsibility. Does anybody know where that quote's from? Yes, good job, guys. You guys are smarter than my 8:30 session yesterday. So it's from Uncle Ben and Spider-Man. Now, if you haven't seen it, it is the unrealistic Spider-Man. That's the one where the upside-down kiss happens, not the Marvel one. So keep that in mind if you want to see where that actually originates from. But where are we actually implementing Agile, right? Now we're looking at taking all this wonderful knowledge and trying to go, all right, let's put this to work. So the first thing, what we did, we had a pretty honest reflection with our entire team and looked at it. I did this as well when I was a solo admin and said, all right, what's going well and what am I actually doing right now to make this all work? So we'd really thought through the stages of where our work went, who was touching the work at each piece. Then who's getting involved after that stage? What did it mean to be done with each stage? Really sit down, hold a conversation with either yourself, if it means whiteboarding it, if it means putting sticky notes up, really take the time to walk through that process from end to end. Then what you need to do is make some agreement, right? Maybe it's some tough conversations of not so much saying, well, hey, we take too long here, hey, we take too long there, but really have that honest reflection of where you guys are feeling stuck. A big piece of this comes from talking to your end users. If they feel there's a certain piece of the experience they don't love, so maybe they wish they could see the functionality a little bit sooner, that's okay. Take that as an opportunity to make yourself even better and make your development skills even stronger. And last but not least is making sure you understand what success looks like for you. So this could be, hey, maybe we want to get our customer satisfaction for our actual internal users. We want that to increase by 10%. Or maybe that means that we want to develop more capabilities and have more features every release, 10% over the next month, next 3 months. Maybe that just means that you just want to have user stories logged. That's okay. Understand what that first success metric is going to look like on your journey to Agile. Now, the big thing on this as well is I talked about this with you guys. Consider where you're at organizationally and where your situation is and adapt the best you can. Just like Salesforce, where we can do all these wonderful things and we have a lot of flexibility, Agile actually marries up with this pretty well. So if it just means that you're going to go ahead and put the daily stand-up in and talk for 15 minutes every day or do a 15-minute reflection by yourself, that's okay, that's fine. Guess what? That's forward progress. Or maybe you actually want to do a full rollout. That's great. If that seems like the right idea and you guys can manage the change and actually have everyone bought in, fantastic. But really think what's going to be the most effective for you after you've worked through that plan. The second piece with it, especially I think my first time Agile folks, those trailheads, there's additional training, there's a ton of things online. Making sure you're expanding your knowledge base. Even myself, I still take a lot of different training. I also still talk to a lot of different Agile teams and other development teams. Why? they're not building Salesforce sometimes, but guess what? They're still trying to solve the same problems that we are. We have an evolving business world that we're trying to keep up with from a technology side. That insight of how others are solving it has helped me immensely. So make sure, the internet is a wonderful thing. Twitter is a wonderful thing. I cannot tell you guys how much help I have gotten over the last 5 or 6 years from just the Salesforce community about how to do these things in a better way. And last but not least, again, coming back to it, our team and our stakeholders. Make sure everyone has a seat at the table. Make sure everyone and from every angle is being heard about how we actually are going to make our world better as a Salesforce instance. Now, I think this is probably, I'll speak more towards the executive level. A lot of times I got questions about, well, why are you doing all this stuff? Just go make the opportunity thing better for me. Why do you want to do all that, right? A lot of these efforts that I think are more foundational to making a long-term Salesforce investment die. Why? Because we don't have a way to measure what success means. I can't articulate that to a business stakeholder. So we have that lack of buy-in, but there's no clear direction now for them to understand that, hey, guess what? I got these 2 new developers. Here's how those developers have helped us evolve. Or maybe we've got some outside consultants. We're trying to prove the value there. Or maybe it's just doing all this extra administrative work. What's the value in that? So how we solved this was, again, we relied on making data-driven decisions. We built dashboards, and we held ourselves as a team and also our stakeholders to constantly reviewing our metrics. So we talked about how many stories we could release every sprint. We talked about how many points that meant. We talked about how quickly we could develop work. And we constantly were able to show that, guess what? Last week it took us 14 days to build a story, test it, and deploy it. But guess what? This week it only took us 6. That type of improvement is something that you cannot show if all your work is just captured in an Evernote notebook or a piece of paper on the side of your desk. But what we also did was we looked at all the work at the end of our sprints, and we said, is this work the right work to be doing? Are we helping our company go faster and go further? And are we making the difference that we promised by developing this work? So to do that a few different ways, what we started to look at was first baselining functionality. So one piece that we did was actually going out every quarter and going out to our users and saying, hey, how happy are you with Salesforce? We could measure it down to certain key business processes. Maybe it was certain just high-level objectives that we were covering. But we really started to get a pulse from every group and seeing which division was happy with our Salesforce instance. Now, not just that kind of touchy-feely. I think sometimes the touchy-feely is a little hard because if everyone loves your awesome admin because you just do everything for them and you make things work, maybe sometimes you get a better rating. But some people get a little subjective about surveys. So guess what we did? We said, people love us. We get these awesome ratings, but guess what? Now I'm going to show you some of these productivity gains. So when you guys hear all those wonderful ROI metrics and how much faster people are, here's the magic behind this, right? What we ended up doing was we would take business processes as we replaced them and moved them into Salesforce. We'd sit down, pen and paper, little timers on there, and just go, all right, let me see what you actually used to do. Run me through that process. Start a clock, count some clicks, and actually see and go, okay, that took you 15 clicks, it took you 18 minutes in your old system because it loaded forever. Now let's run it in Salesforce. Let me see what you would actually do. All right, maybe we wait till they get a call and boom, here we go. All right, and 3 clicks, 2 minutes, done. And now I do that over and over again, and guess what I have? I have a ton of data that I can go and show to our teams and say, guess what? We now brought down the time it takes our service reps to actually work with our customers. We brought that down by 12 minutes. But guess what? Now that they're not doing all those clicks, they're actually able to talk to our customers more and really focusing on servicing them and not trying to manage the system and do all this administrative work. Now, from the development side, this is just as important as some of those user experience pieces. You will see up here we have 3 wonderful charts. These are very traditional across a lot of development teams. So we have first our cumulative flow diagram. Now what this is really doing is it's really helpful to show us in certain buckets of stages. So maybe we have our not started, our in progress, our dev completed, our deployed. We're really able to see now over certain time where that work is sticking at. So this really helps you see, do you have that bottleneck in your testing bucket? Is that staying consistent, right? Or do we have a nice smooth flow throughout the release? Now that second one also gives you a little bit of that same perspective. It's a burn down chart. So what I'm able to see here is, let's say at the top, this is our 50 story points, right? If I want to see a nice smooth curve and what's actually going down there, I'm able to track, are we just pushing all the work and completing it on the last day? Or are we slowly chipping away at it just as we planned in Agile, right? We're slowly getting all that work, 3 points a day, 4 points a day. But that last one, I think this is probably the one that speaks to folks the most, and is probably the easiest to look at, is our velocity chart. So let's say we have those story points that we talked about. We said we're going to do 50 points, right? That 50 points is represented on that blue bar here on the left. And guess what's on the right there? That's how much we actually delivered. So now I can actually show folks what's our adherence to the work that we say. So if we see that, hey, maybe we're overestimating every time, now I can start to accurately estimate and say, guess what? We were trying to take 50 points. We can only really do 30. So okay, now we start to plan 30. But guess what? We get a new developer, and now we see we can actually hit 60. So now we can start to scale that back up and really start to get that feel for how quickly we can do work. There's nothing more powerful than having a conversation with folks and saying, well, why can't you do more work? Well, because I know if I try and take it on, I probably won't get it done. Or hey, guess what? If you want that work done, I know I need more resources because I have proven data that this is how fast we can work. Now, once that process is all there, right, you got a good feeling behind this, there is a very big piece of this, right, that is capturing all that work in the right place. So these are kind of the tools of the trade that will help you take work from its inception to its actual delivery. Now, I will say, if I were to put everything that can actually do this up, again, smaller font, bigger slide. These are a few that I have worked with. Highly recommend if you do not have a business case for this yet, or you're kind of getting your feet wet and want to see what's out there, or even if you are still looking at or you're using Agile, the Agile Accelerator, a completely free application. It is, I think, an unmanaged package, but it is on the App Exchange. It has very frequent releases, so it is being updated. It is lightning ready too. Wonderful application to use for that. Just two others I've used, CA Agile Central. We're now using Jira Agile. Both are fantastic tools in helping you get there. Now, last but not least, it was a great job, right? You guys loved the presentation, got you all warmed up for happy hour. You're ready to end your day now, your last session. So what should you do now, right? First, take those Agile trailheads. Even if you are an Agile Ninja, get those extra badges on there, right? They are attached to your session here, so you can always go to the Salesforce event, click that, take those Agile trailheads. There's a lot of good information, comes directly from Salesforce. It also comes directly from the makers of Jira. So there's a lot of industry-leading experts putting information on there for you. Second, start that self-reflection. Really start to look at your development practice and look at the life cycle of your user stories or the work that you're doing and really start to understand what that looks like. Once you've done that, get that session together, guys. Talk to your stakeholders, talk to your team, and ask them what it's like to work with you. And ask for that honest feedback. What could I do better? How can I help you more? And last but not least, once you have all that put together, take those areas of improvement, put them in a little list. I'll admit it, I have a little sticky note that sits on my desk, and it tells me exactly what I want to work on for the next month. And guess what? I look at that every day, and I make a plan, and I say, guess what? I'm going to work on doing that better. If you slowly take those little steps, I promise you, you will get forward. So with that, guys, thank you guys very much. I know we're right at the 5 o'clock mark, so I cannot thank you guys enough for coming in. We do have 2 minutes left, so I will open up if you guys want to ask any questions. If you want to go get drinks, that's A-OK by me too. But if you guys have any questions, I'll take a few. I'll also be hanging outside the room for a little bit. But any questions before we roll out? Yes, in the back. What was that? The question was, is there a name for someone that's kind of between Agile and Waterfall? I'll call that making the transition to Agile. No, I mean, there's no formal name for it exactly. I think there's a lot of folks that kind of do that same approach. There's also, I think, some that do it kind of project-based and maybe do development work on the Agile side. But no, good question. Always good, again, one of those things you can blend. Yep. Yeah, so traditionally there is usually when you're actually creating that story, Usually, kind of in my experience, I can sometimes do it because I was kind of a hybrid. If you're a solo admin, obviously that's going to be you. If you're working more on the enterprise side, what you can do is it's usually driven by whoever's doing the development work. Usually there's also kind of setting up some guidelines as well. So we had a pretty clear book that we spread across our developers and said, hey, guess what? This work is traditionally a 1 to 3. This work is traditionally a 5 to 7. So it's really good guidelines. It's usually done either when you're writing the story to start, or there's usually backlog grooming sessions that are kind of held outside of that. So that's usually the big point of where that happens. But all good questions there. That's a really good one. Absolutely. Anybody else have other questions? Yep, right there, Mike.
So this framework is more used for like one-off projects where it's like it has a set start and end time. Do you have any like suggestions about how to communicate about like role-based or recurring things that you need to be doing, or like showing it along with all the other things that you're working on?
Yeah, so I mean the big thing I will say about Agile is it can be used for projects, right? You can still structure it that way, but a lot of times when we're doing development work, we had work that was actually being done for a project in there with some of the recurring work. So maybe it's just some cleanup work. That absolutely can still fit in there. Sometimes I'll see if you're still kind of, we'll say, growing in terms of the actual development capabilities, those folks will go with more of a Kanban approach because you can just constantly keep pulling work, whereas sprints kind of does sit to that fixed interval where it's, hey, we're locked in for 2 weeks of where we're going. So I'd say probably Kanban's a better fit, but you can absolutely make both of those work for that kind of development style. Absolutely, good question. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Yes. So we are dealing with that. I'll be very honest. It's one of the things. I'm 3 months into my new commitment. But I will say absolutely you have to. Why? Because unless you're using different development resources, the work is all going to be done by the same people. The bigger part with that usually comes in with prioritization. I tell everyone, you're going to get your cake at some point, but tomorrow someone else may have to get the cake because they've got a big business priority. That all comes to me as just really those business communications. I try to have some that are cross-functional. I have some that are a little bit more direct, but making sure everyone kind of sees the bigger picture. Hey, we all go together in our own boat that is Salesforce. We really got to drive this. The other thing too, I also find a lot of people when we develop stuff for one, we'll start to show them and they'll be like, ooh, I want that too, which also helps. But yeah, trying to keep everyone in one unless you have different development teams, it'll keep your development team sane. Maybe just tagging the work and what you have as well. We try and do that as well to say, hey, this is this division, they're getting that, they want this or that. That's probably the easiest way just to give you guys a little bit of clarity on that one. Good question. That answer that? Awesome. Any other questions? I see people hanging out for a little bit. Shoot.
I got one. So I'm a solo admin, and
Woo. Hang in there.
Yeah, thanks. And over the past month or so, I've been really, investigating Agile. I've taken the trails. I've read a couple books, and I really want to give it a shot. I installed the Agile Accelerator, like a dev org, and messed around with it. I was actually kind of frustrated by it, just because there's a lot in there that I don't need. And it's not customizable to the extent that I would like, because a lot of it's like Visual Force, and I can't change it because I don't have those skills. So I tried Jira too, but that kind of seems like a lot, but I may go with that. But the problem with that is my bosses would need a whole nother login to a different system. And so do you think I'm in way over my head, maybe just making like a simple app myself, with a few reports and dashboards, integrating with cases, maybe building a flow to help my business users, send things to me?
No, so good question. I was very much at the same point. I installed Agile Accelerator the first time I tried this, and I went, whoa, that's a lot of tabs. Holy crap. And again, it's all Visual Force or Lightning components at this point. What I would say the easiest way to start with this is really focus on creating the foundation of it. So really just work on hey, start creating user stories. Even if it's just that and being able to capture the work, that's kind of at the heart of it. Where you'll start to see is, I think, all of the actual cool functionality that sits on top of the Agile Accelerator. As you start to get more of a process that's oh, okay, here's how we have to push work, here's how we put it into releases, here's how we put it into sprints, you'll start to find that stuff to be more useful, but it's really just getting in the habit of creating the work. I wouldn't say you're crazy if you want to start with just a custom object that's really, really simple. I think that's totally fine. Okay. It's just really trying to figure out, I always tell everyone, get used to capturing the work and getting it in that consistent form, and then a tool starts to make sense. If you kind of go the backwards route, you're kind of trying to jam it in the wrong end there. And it usually gets to the point of like, oh, this is frustrating. I don't want to do this anymore. But yeah, I did the same exact thing. So I think any starting point is better than anything. But there's also, to check with you, there's Agile Accelerator out there, an actual accelerator from Salesforce. So if you guys have the ability to take the accelerators, I know they're included with some licenses. Others, you do have to pay a little bit more for them. They're extremely helpful. Those professionals are from Salesforce. They actually know how to use the tool itself, and they can really start to get more of a customization for you guys to say, okay, here's how you can use the tool and help you out. They won't do any like Visualforce crazy stuff, but they'll at least give you some kind of a jump start. But yeah, good question. Absolutely. I think we have one over here, yep. Good question. I think the biggest thing with that is always communication. Always, always, always over-communicate early and often. I'm a big baseball fan. My dad always told me growing up, swing early and often. I do the same thing with a lot of my communication. Why is because a lot of that's all just trust-based. If people trust you and you say, hey, guess what? It typically takes us this long. Here's what it looks like. We're going to try and get this into this release, right? You'll start to get more comfortable as you commit work. You start to feel like, okay, I can actually get this done. Then you're probably going to feel a little bit more locked in. But make sure, I think the first few times that you do this stuff is just making sure that people know, like, we might fall down. But guess what? That's A-okay. Like, it's going to happen a few times. It's never perfect. It's never easy. But after the first, I'd say 5 or 6 times doing it, you'll start to get a little bit more comfortable, and people will really start to go, okay. The other thing, too, is, again, it's Agile. There's a reason we call it that is because things change, things pop up. People have to get used to the priorities changing a little bit. Granted, you don't want to get in the habit of just being like, whoa, we're not doing this. Whoa, we're doing that. Whoa, we're doing that. We have to stand to some level of commitment. But yeah, really, really make sure, again, a lot of communication's key. Trying to give them full visibility of the backlog, even if it's not theirs, it still helps because they're really saying, all right, guess what? The company's going forward regardless. We got to do this piece of work. It's really important to that part of the business. Let's do it. Rock on. But guess what? I'll get my shot next time. So that's fine. But yeah, excellent question. Never easy though, I promise. Takes a little bit of time. I always find coffee helps too. Coffee and donuts are wonderful. But yeah, you have a question there?
So I guess what I find a challenge with is when I'm building something in Salesforce that I've never built before. So for example, we're deploying Flow. And so I've built the first iteration, we UAT'd it, and now I'm got feedback, and so I'm going to go through that again. How do I figure out an estimate of time, effort to put it into a sprint? Because I don't know how to develop that next piece of work.
Yeah, so good question. Traditionally what we'll see is you'll try and identify what your solution is first. So maybe you know that you're actually going for flow. And that's awesome, right? You know what you're going to do, but you really don't know how long it is. Really what you'll see is underneath on a Scrum, like a Scrum story, you'll see there's typically like these little tasks under there. The first one is usually do the development part. I always say try and give yourself a little bit more time. No one will ever be mad at you for overestimating how long it will take and then you going, all right, I got it done in 8 hours instead of the 14 I had out there. You'll also start to, as you get more familiar, I mean, I've done it a little bit myself. As you start to get comfortable with the work and really start estimating it, you'll start to see you get more consistent about, all right, I kind of know to figure out a new feature, it takes me like 2 hours. I got to do trailheads, that takes me another hour. And then to actually build it, it takes me another hour after that. So it's really give yourself, I think, more time. That's the biggest thing I can say. I still give our developers a little bit of trouble sometimes because they're like, yeah, I'll do it in 2 hours. I'm like, are you really going to do it in 2 hours, or are you going to do it in like 2 hours plus 3 hours? And I'm like, guys, overestimate for me, right? Because you usually catch yourself where everyone wants to get things done quickly, but we really have to be realistic about stuff, right? Speed is always relative. I can try and tell a developer to do 2 hours, but if 5 is our good speed and good quality, guess what? That's great. Then I'm going to look at how we can make 5 or 6 faster, right? Is it doing more training for those guys to kind of enable that and make sure it's done further? The other thing, too, I've seen, people have written just like POC stories where they'll just take a chunk of time and just be like, hey, guess what? Like, I'm going to lower my capacity for this week, so maybe I'm just going to only do like 20 hours of development work because I know I have a POC to do for another 10. That way I know, you kind of have a full 10 hours to just explore a little bit. So that's another idea. There's a ton of options that are out there. There's no technical right answer. But yeah, always make sure give yourself more time to kind of find that out. And just trailhead on. Trailhead's a good guide too, especially if you're trying to find that. I find their estimates with new functionality is usually pretty accurate of how long it will take. But good question. Anybody else have questions? Or are you guys just like me so much you're just hanging out? Which I'm okay with. Plus there's other good questions. All right, if not, you guys, make sure to fill out survey. I am on Twitter if you guys want to get in contact with me. The slides are going to be on the event as well. So make sure you guys check that out. If not, I'll see you guys at the concert tonight. Thank you guys for coming by. I appreciate it.